I am Liam, and I am 32 years old, 8 months into a grueling, soul-crushing engineering deployment in the blistering heat of Dubai. My own parents sold my downtown apartment behind my back just to fund my younger brother's extravagant wedding. While I was working 80-hour weeks, sweating through my suits and missing holidays to build a secure future, my parents had the absolute audacity to call me on a video chat from their pristine suburban driveway. My father looked right into the camera, entirely unbothered by what he had done, and said, "We are family, Liam. We look out for each other. You have more than enough." Right behind him, I could see my 26-year-old brother, Julian. He was leaning casually against a brand-new Porsche Macan, a car bought entirely with the stolen cash from my property sale. Julian grinned like a spoiled child on Christmas morning and shouted, "Thanks for the wedding present, bro." They were laughing. They genuinely humiliated me, treating my life's work, my sleepless nights, and my sacrifices as nothing more than a convenient slush fund for their own vanity. But there is one massive, earth-shattering detail they did not know. They did not know that I did not legally own that apartment under my personal name. My private real estate holding company, Apex Holdings, owned the deed. And even more devastating for them, Apex Holdings was the exact same anonymous benefactor that had been secretly paying their mortgage and keeping a roof over their heads for the last 4 years. Right as they were celebrating their grand theft and patting themselves on the back, they were about to trigger their own absolute, irreversible financial ruin. Before I tell you exactly how I dismantled their lives piece by agonizing piece, please hit that like button if you believe that blood does not give anyone the right to steal your hard-earned money. And do not forget to let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. I read every single one, and I appreciate your support. Now, let us go back to the exact moment this nightmare began. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Dubai. The temperature outside was pushing 110 degrees, but inside my glass-walled office, the air conditioning was blasting so hard my fingers felt numb. My desk was completely buried under stacks of architectural blueprints, structural integrity reports, and vendor contracts. I was exhausted. I am talking about the kind of bone-deep, spirit-breaking tired that makes your eyes burn just from keeping them open. I had just secured a massive promotion at my firm, but it came at the cost of having absolutely no personal life. That is when my cell phone lit up on my desk. It was an incoming video call from my mother. I sat back in my heavy leather chair and stared at the screen for a long, quiet moment. My parents rarely called me just to see how I was doing. They never called to ask if I was eating well, if the time zone difference was messing with my sleep, or if I was happy. A call from my family usually meant a crisis, a financial demand, or a bitter complaint about how I was not present enough for family gatherings. I took a deep, steadying breath, braced myself for whatever manufactured drama was about to unfold, and accepted the call. My mother's face immediately filled the screen. She was practically radiating joy, wearing a bright floral blouse I recognized from a recent high-end shopping spree she had posted about on social media. Her hair was perfectly styled, and she had that specific high-pitched, sing-song tone to her voice. "Liam, oh, honey, we have the most wonderful news," she sang, her eyes sparkling with a frantic kind of energy. Whenever my mother used that specific tone, my stomach dropped. It meant she wanted something expensive, or far worse, she had already done something she knew I would absolutely despise. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the mahogany desk, and crossed my arms defensively. "What is going on, Mom?" "I am in the middle of a massive project review." "Well," she started, her eyes darting slightly off camera as if seeking reassurance from someone else. "You know Julian has been planning his wedding with Chloe. The venue they want is spectacular, Liam. Just breathtaking. The Grandview Estate. But the costs were getting a little out of hand, and Chloe's family has very high expectations." I knew exactly what she meant by out of hand. Chloe came from a wealthy family. Her father was a self-made logistics millionaire who hated anything less than absolute perfection. Julian, on the other hand, was 26 years old and had never held a steady job in his entire life. He jumped from one failed startup idea to another, constantly needing bailouts. Yet, He wanted a wedding that matched Chloe's high society status. We are talking imported orchids from Holland, a 12-piece live orchestra, a customized ice sculpture, and a 5-course gourmet dinner for 300 people. $100,000 wedding. And, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously flat, what does that have to do with me? My father's face suddenly appeared beside my mother's in the frame. He had that jovial, overly friendly smile he always wore when he was trying to sell a terrible idea or cover up a massive mistake. We found the perfect solution for the funding issue, son. It is a win-win for everyone. We sold your apartment. The words did not register in my brain at first. The syllables hung in the air, completely disjointed. It felt like a physical blow to my chest, knocking the wind right out of my lungs. I gripped the edge of my desk until my knuckles turned completely white. You did what? I whispered. Your downtown condo? My mother chimed in loudly, entirely ignoring the absolute shock and horror painted across my face. We got an excellent price for it in today's real estate market. The buyer paid straight cash. It was more than enough to cover all of Julian's wedding expenses, pay off some of our lingering debts, and Julian even got a little something extra for the honeymoon getaway. I stared at the screen, my mind racing through 1,000 terrifying thoughts. That is my apartment. I bought that place with my own money. My name is on the deed. You cannot just sell a home that belongs to me. Well, technically, yes, it was yours, my father said, waving his hand as if swatting away a minor annoyance. But we have been managing the mail and checking on the plumbing while you are overseas. And since you are not even using it, we figured it was the best, most logical move for the family. You are making a massive salary in Dubai anyway. You can just buy another, bigger place when you finally decide to move back. Before I could even formulate a response to that absolute insanity, Julian pushed his way into the camera frame. He looked incredibly smug, wearing a designer linen shirt that cost more than my first car. Liam, bro, it is going to be the wedding of the decade. You should see the Porsche Macan I just picked up for the getaway car. It is incredible. Drives like a dream. I felt a cold, hard knot of pure rage forming in the pit of my stomach. My own blood had robbed me blind. How exactly did you manage to sell a piece of real estate that is legally mine? The title company would need my physical presence or a notarized power of attorney. My father cleared his throat, suddenly looking fascinated by the clouds in the sky. We handled some of the paperwork locally. You know how these bureaucratic things work. Family helping family. We found an agent who understood the situation. You forged my signature, I stated. I did not ask. I stated it as a stone-cold, undeniable fact. That is such an ugly, aggressive way to put it. My mother scolded, her voice dripping with artificial hurt and victimhood. We are family, Liam. We look out for each other. You have always been the strong one. You are being entirely too dramatic about a building you do not even live in right now. I looked at the three of them through the digital connection. My mother, beaming with pride over a luxury wedding she did not contribute a single dime toward. My father, nodding along like he had just executed a brilliant corporate merger instead of committing a felony. My brother, completely oblivious to the fact that his luxury lifestyle was built on a foundation of grand theft. There was not a single ounce of guilt in their eyes, not a flicker of hesitation. They genuinely believed they were entitled to the fruits of my labor. I have to go, I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of any emotion. Work is calling. Of course, honey, my mother said brightly, entirely misreading my silence as submission. We love you. Do not forget to book your flight for the wedding next month. I reached forward and ended the call. The screen went black. I sat in the total, suffocating silence of my office. They thought they had played the perfect game. They thought the responsible, quiet older brother would just swallow this massive betrayal, accept his financial losses to keep the peace, and maybe even send a congratulatory gift. They had no idea the kind of hell they had just invited into their lives. I reached for my cell phone and pulled up the contact for my lawyer. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of what they did, and why my upcoming retaliation was so merciless, you have to understand the toxic dynamic of my family history. I was the eldest son, which in my household meant I was the designated workhorse, the safety net, the one who was expected to shoulder every burden without complaint. Julian, born exactly 6 years after me, was the golden child. The miracle baby. The one who could do absolutely no wrong. Growing up, the disparity was sickening. There was no college fund waiting for me when I graduated high school. Instead, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and explained that character is built through struggle. So, I worked the graveyard shift at a local Walmart, stocking shelves until 3 in the morning, just to pay for my engineering degree. I ate cheap instant noodles, wore thrift store clothes with frayed cuffs, and studied until my eyes literally bled. Meanwhile, Julian was handed the world on a silver platter. When he turned 16, my parents co-signed a predatory car loan just so he could drive a brand new convertible to high school. When he dropped out of his first out-of-state college because the classes were too hard, they gladly paid his rent in a luxury apartment complex so he could find himself. They drained their own retirement accounts and mortgaged their future to fund his endless string of hobbies. They constantly told me that I was strong and capable, so I did not need their financial help. They were absolutely right. I did not need their help. I survived on my own. I climbed the corporate ladder on my own merit, fighting tooth and nail for every single promotion. And 5 years ago, after securing a massive bonus, I bought that downtown apartment. It was not just a piece of real estate to me. It was my sanctuary. It was the physical, tangible proof that a kid who stocked shelves at midnight could build something beautiful out of nothing. It had exposed brick walls, huge windows overlooking the city skyline, and it was the only place on earth where I felt truly safe. But I knew my family. I knew their absolute lack of boundaries and their insatiable appetite for money they did not earn. A year after I bought the apartment, my lawyer and best friend from college, Marcus, gave me a piece of advice that would ultimately become the weapon of their destruction. We were sitting in his downtown office, reviewing my assets before I took the engineering contract in Dubai. Marcus knew my family's history. He looked at me across his desk and said, "Liam, you need to protect this property. If something happens to your parents, they will look to you to liquidate your assets to save them. We need to create a barrier." So, we set up a private holding company called Apex Holdings. We went through the arduous legal process of transferring the deed of the apartment from my personal name to the corporation. On public record, Apex Holdings owned the property. I owned Apex. It was an ironclad, legally binding wall of protection. Nobody in my family knew about the corporate transfer. To them, it was still just Liam's condo. And I desperately needed that wall because, exactly 4 years ago, my parents hit a devastating financial wall of their own. My father, always looking for a shortcut to wealth, made a disastrous investment in a friend's shady logistics business. The business went completely bankrupt in less than a year. My parents were suddenly drowning in insurmountable debt. Their credit cards were maxed out. They were facing a massive lawsuit from angry creditors. The bank sent them a final warning notice, threatening immediate foreclosure on their suburban house. I remember the day vividly. It was Thanksgiving. The turkey was cold on the table. My mother was sobbing uncontrollably into a napkin, and my father was staring at the floor, looking like a broken man. They pulled me aside into the kitchen and practically begged me on their knees for a loan of $50,000 to stop the foreclosure. I stood there, looking at the people who had abandoned me during my own struggles. I knew with absolute certainty that if I gave them that money directly, they would never respect it. They would view it as an early inheritance. They would learn nothing, and they would keep coming back for more until I was bled dry. So I looked my father in the eye and lied. I told them I did not have the cash. I told them my money was tied up in aggressive investments and I could not liquidate it without massive penalties. They screamed at me. They called me a selfish, ungrateful son who cared more about his bank account than his own flesh and blood. They told me I was dead to them. But the very next week, a mysterious, faceless legal entity called Apex Holdings contacted their primary bank. Through Marcus acting as the intermediary, Apex Holdings paid off their most urgent, high-interest credit card debt. Furthermore, Apex set up a blind, standing wire transfer to cover their monthly mortgage in full. For 4 solid years, while I lived in a tiny, cramped studio apartment in Dubai, enduring sandstorms and corporate burnout, I sent a massive portion of my salary back to the States. I kept my parents from living in a cardboard box on the street. They thought they had an anonymous guardian angel. They told the rest of the family that a guilt-ridden old business partner of my grandfather's was saving them. They took the money every single month, and they learned absolutely nothing about financial responsibility. The trigger for this current, catastrophic disaster happened 3 months ago when Julian proposed to Chloe. Chloe was accustomed to extreme luxury. Her father, Richard, was a man who demanded excellence and judged everyone by their net worth. When Julian introduced our parents to Richard at a country club dinner, the deep financial insecurity of my family clashed violently with Richard's aggressive wealth. My mother, utterly desperate to keep up appearances and secure Julian's place in this high-society family, foolishly promised Richard that we would proudly split the cost of the massive wedding. I knew they did not have a single dime to their name outside of the mortgage I was secretly paying. I watched from afar, wondering how they planned to pull off this colossal lie. Then, Aunt Beatrice got involved. Beatrice is my mother's older sister. She is a bitter, manipulative woman who smiles warmly to your face while calculating the exact resale value of the watch on your wrist. She went through a messy divorce years ago and has resented anyone with financial stability ever since. Through the family grapevine, I later learned that Beatrice was the snake who planted the venomous seed. They were sitting at a Sunday barbecue in my parents' backyard, panicking about how to pay the massive catering and venue deposits. Beatrice casually took a sip of her wine and mentioned my downtown apartment. "Liam is never there," she had whispered, leaning in close. "He is making an absolute fortune in Dubai. He probably doesn't even care about that old place anymore. It is just sitting there empty. If you just handle the paperwork quietly, you could sell it. He owes you for raising him, doesn't he? Think of it as a belated payment for everything you sacrificed for his childhood." That deeply twisted logic was all the justification my greedy parents needed. They went into my old bedroom, dug through my boxes, and found the spare set of keys I had left them for emergencies. They hired a shady, fast-cash real estate agent who intentionally did not ask too many questions. They forged my signature on the transfer documents, entirely unaware that the name Liam meant absolutely nothing on a deed owned by Apex Holdings. They sold my sanctuary, my proudest achievement, to a cash buyer who was looking to flip it quickly. They took the massive payout, cleared their remaining small debts, handed a massive chunk to the luxury wedding planner, and bought Julian his precious Porsche Macan. They felt completely invincible. They felt they had finally outsmarted the system and secured their golden child's future. But as I sat in my Dubai office, staring at Marcus's contact name on my phone screen, I felt a dangerous, terrifying kind of calm wash over my entire body. It was the heavy, breathless calm that comes right before a devastating Category 5 hurricane makes landfall. I pressed the call button. The storm was no longer brewing in the distance. The storm had arrived at their front door. The phone rang twice before Marcus answered. His voice was thick with sleep. "Liam, what is going on? It is 3 in the morning here. Is there an emergency with the overseas contract?" "I need you to wake up, Marcus," I said, my voice steady, cold, and entirely devoid of panic. "Grab a pen and turn on your laptop. My family just made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of their entire lives, and things are about to get incredibly messy." I could hear the rustle of sheets and a heavy sigh. "I'm listening. What did they do this time?" I stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my office, looking down at the glittering, artificial lights of the city below. They sold my downtown apartment. They hired a shady realtor, forged my signature on the closing documents, and used the cash to fund Julian's $100,000 wedding. They even bought him a Porsche. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. The sound of Marcus typing frantically echoed through the speaker. "Jesus Christ, Liam. That is not just a family dispute. That is straight-up multi-count felony fraud. How much cash are we talking about? They probably dumped it for around $400,000 in this aggressive market. I need to know our exact legal standing right this second. Okay, first things first, Marcus said, his sharp lawyer instincts fully kicking in, the sleep entirely gone from his voice. Do you have the original deed and the Apex Holdings corporate documentation in your secure cloud drive? Everything is there. The articles of incorporation, the property transfer from 5 years ago. I learned a long time ago not to trust my parents with anything that involves a paper trail. Good, Marcus said, his tone turning predatory. But Liam, you need to realize the absolute chaos this is going to cause. If your parents forged your personal signature on a property legally owned by Apex Holdings, the entire sale is completely invalid. The buyer does not actually own the property. The title insurance company is going to completely freak out. It is a massive, multi-tiered federal fraud. The fallout will be biblical. I am counting on it, I replied, my voice hard as steel. But there is an immediate step we need to take. You need to contact the corporate banking division for Apex Holdings as soon as they open. I want all automated payments to my parents' accounts stopped. Effective right this second. The mortgage, the credit card payoffs, the utility bills. I want the financial tap completely shut off. Marcus hesitated for a fraction of a second. Liam, I have to warn you as your counsel. If you stop those blind payments, the bank will immediately notice the default. They are already on thin ice. This will trigger aggressive foreclosure proceedings on their suburban house within 60 days. They will lose their home. They will lose everything. They should have thought about the concept of homeownership before they decided to steal mine, I said, feeling absolutely zero remorse. They declared a war when they picked up a pen and forged my name. I am just finishing what they started. Cut the funds. Done, Marcus agreed. I am also filing an emergency ex parte injunction to freeze the proceeds of the fraudulent sale. Any money left in their bank accounts from that transaction will be locked down by a federal judge pending a massive fraud investigation. If I file it first thing in the morning, the judge will sign off by noon. They won't be able to buy a cup of coffee. Do it. Call me when the trap is set. I hung up the phone. The first heavy domino had been pushed. Now it was just a matter of sitting back and watching their perfect, stolen world collapse around them. The chaos started much faster than I anticipated. Because my parents had been so eager to spend the stolen money, they had written dozens of massive checks to luxury vendors. But bank transfers for large real estate transactions take time to fully clear, and Marcus's injunction hit the accounts like a lightning strike. The very next day, my phone began to buzz relentlessly with notifications from the family group chat. I had muted the chat months ago because I was tired of seeing pictures of Julian's expensive dinners, but I unmuted it now just to watch the show unfold in real time. Julian. OMG. The florist is being so incredibly difficult about the payment. They just called and said the $10,000 check for the orchids didn't clear. What is going on? Mom. Don't worry, sweetheart. Your father is calling the bank manager right now. It is probably just a stupid technical glitch. The bank is always making mistakes. Julian. But what if they cancel the order? The imported orchids are the centerpiece for the reception. Chloe is going to have a total meltdown. Dad, Julian, calm down. Everything is fine. Just some minor banking delays regarding the large deposit. I will have it sorted by noon. Do not panic, Chloe. I took a screenshot of the entire conversation and sent it to Marcus with a single, cold text message. The bleeding has started. 2 hours later, the real panic set in. My private email chimed. I received a frantic, highly unprofessional email from a woman named Stella. She was Julian's high-end luxury wedding planner. Dear Mr. Liam, the email read, marked with high importance. I am reaching out to you directly because I am entirely unable to contact your parents, and several of our premium vendors are threatening to walk away and cancel their services due to severe payment issues. The massive catering deposit for the caviar and Wagyu beef bounced entirely. The Grandview Estate venue is demanding an immediate wire transfer of $40,000, or they will release your brother's date to another couple. Your brother keeps assuring me everything is fine, but I have 17 different vendors asking for money, and the tailor for the custom suits is threatening to withhold the garments. Please call me urgently. My business reputation is on the line. I read the email twice, savoring the absolute, naked desperation in her words. My family had dragged this poor woman into their web of lies. I replied with a brief, utterly professional note. Dear Stella, I am currently stationed overseas for work and have absolutely zero financial involvement in Julian's wedding or my parents' accounts. You will need to take this matter up with them directly. Best of luck resolving your invoices. Just as I hit send and closed the laptop, my personal cell phone rang. The caller ID showed Uncle Henry. Henry was my father's younger brother. He had always played the role of the sympathetic, understanding uncle, the one who would pull me aside at Thanksgiving dinners, hand me a beer, and tell me he knew how hard I worked and how unfair my parents were. But I knew better. Henry was a notorious gossip, a coward, and an opportunist who always sided with whoever had the most money. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. Hello, Uncle Henry. Liam, my boy, he said, his voice dripping with an exaggerated, fake concern that made my skin crawl. How are things out there in the desert? I was just calling to check in on my favorite nephew. Your father mentioned you guys had a little disagreement about the downtown apartment. A little disagreement. That is what they were calling federal fraud and grand theft. Everything is fine, Henry. I lied smoothly, leaning into the role of the clueless, forgiving son. I was a little annoyed they sold it without asking my permission first, but honestly, I am so incredibly busy with this new project here, I barely have time to think about it. The money will be good for Julian's future. He needs the help more than I do. Oh, really? Henry sounded almost disappointed, the excitement deflating from his voice. So you are not incredibly angry? You aren't going to, involve any lawyers or try to reverse the sale. Your mother was a little worried you might do something drastic. Why would I do something drastic? I asked innocently, fighting the urge to laugh. We are family, right? Family looks out for each other. Exactly. That is the spirit. Henry chuckled nervously, clearly relieved. Well, I will let you get back to your important work. Just checking in on you. He hung up hastily. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was on a fishing expedition. He was going to run straight back to my father and reassure him that I was still the passive, compliant victim I had always been. He was a rat, scurrying back to reassure the captain of a rapidly sinking ship. But by feeding him that specific lie, I ensured my parents would keep their guard down completely. They wouldn't hire a defense attorney. They wouldn't try to hide assets. They would walk blindly into the executioner's block. They thought they had outsmarted me. They thought they had secured their perfect, wealthy future at my expense. They were entirely oblivious to the fact that their bank accounts were currently being locked down by a federal judge. Their credit was about to be obliterated, and they were about to lose absolutely everything they held dear. The eye of a hurricane is a deeply deceiving place. It is quiet. The wind dies down, the sky might even look deceptively clear. But it is an illusion. You are simply standing in a momentary pocket of silence, surrounded on all sides by total, catastrophic devastation waiting to collapse inward. For the next 48 hours, I sat in my Dubai apartment, functioning in absolute, chilling silence while my family's stolen world burned to the ground. The emergency federal injunction hit their bank accounts exactly at 3 p.m. their local time. I knew the precise minute the banking system locked them out because my phone suddenly exploded with a barrage of frantic calls. My father called 6 times in a row. Then my mother called 4 times. Then Julian called, his picture flashing aggressively on my screen. I sat at my kitchen island, sipping a cup of dark, bitter coffee, and let every single one of them go straight to voicemail. I opened my voicemail inbox and listened to the messages as they rolled in, tracking their psychological decline in real time. The first message was from my father. His voice was tight, strained, but he was trying incredibly hard to maintain his authoritative, patriarchal tone. Liam, Pick up your phone and call me back immediately. We have a massive problem. The bank has completely frozen our checking and savings accounts. The branch manager is talking about some kind of severe legal hold and a federal fraud investigation regarding the apartment sale. I do not know what kind of sick game you are playing from over there, but you need to call the bank and fix this misunderstanding right now. This is not funny anymore. The second voicemail was from my mother. The smug arrogance she had displayed on the video call just days prior was entirely gone, replaced by a shrill, hyperventilating panic. Liam, sweetheart, please pick up. I am at the grocery store and my card declined. The teller cut my credit card in half. There has been a terrible mistake. We cannot access a single penny of our money, not even the cash from the sale. Dad is furious. Please, honey, we need your help to clear this up. Then came Julian. His message wasn't a plea for help. It was pure, unfiltered, narcissistic rage. You absolute psychotic piece of trash. If you are behind this banking issue, I swear to God I will never forgive you. My entire wedding is ruined. Stella just called me crying hysterically because not a single invoice is paid. The Grandview venue just officially canceled our date and gave it to someone else. Chloe is asking questions I cannot answer. Fix this now, Liam, or I swear I will ruin your life. I deleted the voicemails without a second thought. They still believed they were the victims. They still believed they could bully, guilt, or threaten me into compliance. They had no idea how deep the grave they dug actually was. The next morning, the sun was just rising over the Dubai skyline when I received a secure, encrypted video call from Marcus. He looked exhausted, having been up all night filing paperwork, but his eyes were bright with immense satisfaction. The trap is fully closed and locked tight, Marcus said, taking a long sip from his steel travel mug. The bank received the judge's order. Every single penny from that fraudulent sale is locked down in a frozen holding account. The title insurance company has officially voided the property transfer. The poor cash buyer who thought he got a great deal on your apartment is currently hiring a bulldog litigator to sue your parents into absolute oblivion for fraud and breach of contract. Good, I said quietly, feeling a dark sense of justice settle in my chest. But it gets much darker. Liam, Marcus said, leaning closer to his camera, his expression turning deadly serious. I got a phone call an hour ago from a woman named Elena. She is a senior loan officer at First National Bank, where your parents do their primary banking. She asked to speak with your legal representation immediately. I narrowed my eyes, feeling a spike of adrenaline. Why is a senior loan officer calling my lawyer? Because your parents have completely lost their minds, Marcus said grimly. When their accounts were frozen yesterday afternoon, they panicked. They knew the wedding checks were going to bounce and expose them to Chloe's wealthy family. So, they walked into the branch and tried to take out an emergency, unsecured personal loan for $60,000. With what collateral? I asked, genuinely baffled. They have absolutely nothing. Their house is mortgaged to the hilt, and their credit is garbage. They didn't try to use their collateral, Marcus said softly, letting the words sink in. They tried to use yours. Your father walked in with a folder of your old tax returns. They applied for the massive line of credit using your social security number, your employment history, and your financial credentials. They tried to forge your signature on a loan application. A wave of absolute, sickening disgust washed over me. Selling my apartment behind my back was a crime of immense opportunity, fueled by greed and entitlement. But attempting to steal my identity, ruin my pristine credit score, and bury me in $60,000 of high-interest debt while I was halfway across the world? That was premeditated, pure malice. There was no family left here. There were only desperate parasites willing to kill the host to survive. Elena flagged it immediately, Marcus continued, because the banking system showed the extreme fraud alert we put on your profile 2 days ago. When she confronted your father about the blatant identity theft, he completely lost his temper. He started screaming at the tellers, pounding his fists on the desk, demanding they release the money because he was your father and had the right to your credit. Security had to physically tackle him and escort him out of the building in front of dozens of customers. "Add it to the lawsuit," I told Marcus, my voice devoid of any warmth. "I want every single charge pressed. Identity theft, wire fraud, bank fraud. I want absolutely zero leniency." "Understood," Marcus nodded, typing furiously. "Oh, and one more thing. We subpoenaed the security camera footage from the shady notary office where the forged apartment documents were signed. Guess who was standing right next to your mother, grinning while she forged your signature? Aunt Beatrice," I guessed, remembering the toxic advice she had given at the barbecue. Bingo! She even provided her own driver's license to act as a secondary witness to the fraudulent signing. She is going down as an accessory to federal fraud. Her own life is about to explode. I opened my laptop and cracked my knuckles. It was time for the final, devastating blow. I spent the next 2 hours assembling a digital execution file, a care package of absolute destruction. I compiled the pristine bank records from Apex Holdings, showing exactly 4 years of blind mortgage payments, credit card payoffs, and utility bills. I used a bright yellow digital highlighter to mark the total amount, over $140,000 in secret, unacknowledged financial support. I attached the legal corporate documents proving Apex Holdings owned the apartment, rendering their sale illegal. Finally, I attached the foreclosure warning notice from the bank, which was automatically generated when I stopped the Apex payments 2 days ago. I packaged it all into a single, massive PDF file. I checked the time. It was currently 2 p.m. back in my hometown. According to Julian's boastful social media posts, this was the exact hour he, his fiancée Chloe, and Chloe's wealthy, intimidating father Richard were scheduled for their final wedding tuxedo and dress fittings at an exclusive luxury boutique downtown. It was meant to be a joyous, celebratory afternoon, popping expensive champagne and securing the final details for the wedding of the year. I typed out a short, brutal email and attached the PDF file. I addressed it directly to my father, my mother, and Julian. And then, I carefully typed in the CC line. I CC'd Richard, whose corporate business email was a matter of public record. "Since you are currently experiencing some severe banking difficulties," I wrote, "I thought you might want to review your full, honest financial history. Please pay very close attention to the highlighted payments made by Apex Holdings over the last 4 years. That is the holding company that has been secretly paying your mortgage and keeping you out of bankruptcy. It is also the exact same corporation that actually owned the apartment you just tried to steal and sell. Consider this email my official, permanent resignation as your anonymous benefactor. Good luck dealing with the police and the foreclosure. Liam." My finger hovered over the mousepad. This was the absolute point of no return. Once I hit send, the illusion of our perfect family would be shattered permanently. Chloe's father would see exactly who he was marrying his daughter off to. I did not hesitate for another second. I clicked send. The digital package was delivered. The countdown to 0 had begun. I closed my laptop, walked over to my window, and watched the desert sun set over Dubai. The storm had broken, and I was going to watch them drown in it. I sat motionless in my heavy leather office chair, my eyes completely glued to the laptop screen. I was watching the digital read receipts of that single, explosive email I had just sent. The silence in my Dubai apartment was so incredibly heavy you could cut it with a knife. Thousands of miles away, I knew exactly where my family was. I knew exactly what they were doing. Julian, my mother, my father, Julian's wealthy fiancée Chloe, and Chloe's incredibly intimidating, no-nonsense father, Richard. They were all standing in the middle of an exclusive, high-end downtown bridal boutique. They were surrounded by imported Italian silk, massive crystal chandeliers, and the nauseating, suffocating smell of unearned entitlement. 1 agonizing minute passed, then 2. My heart beat a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. Then my email tracker updated. The digital package had been opened by Richard. A few seconds later, it was opened by my father on his smartphone. I leaned back, steepled my fingers, and waited for the massive shockwave to cross the ocean. I did not have to wait long. But the very first phone call I received did not come from my frantic mother or my raging, spoiled brother. The caller ID flashing aggressively on my screen belonged to Richard. I picked it up on the first ring, keeping my voice perfectly level. "Hello, Richard." "Liam." His voice was dangerously low, cold, and entirely devoid of the polite, country club warmth he usually reserved for social gatherings. "I am currently standing in a private fitting room. Julian is out on the main showroom floor trying on a custom tuxedo that costs more than his entire life savings. Your father is sitting on a velvet couch, sipping complimentary champagne, pretending he owns the world. I just read your email, and I just carefully reviewed the PDF attachments. I figured you should see the absolute truth before you signed any more massive checks to fund their delusion," I said calmly. "I am a man who built a massive logistics empire from the ground up." "Liam," Richard said, his voice vibrating with a terrifying, calculated anger. "I have dealt with ruthless corporate spies. I have dealt with aggressive competitors. I have sat across the table from pathological liars. But I have never, in my entire life, seen a family attempt a scam of this sheer magnitude on their own flesh and blood. I am looking at a 4-year ledger of secret mortgage payments made by your holding company. I am looking at a forged real estate deed. I am looking at an identity theft report from a bank manager. Is this all absolutely 100% verifiable? My lawyer, Marcus, has all the original, certified documents ready to be handed over to a federal judge by tomorrow morning," I replied, staring out at the desert skyline. "My parents forged my signature to sell a property they did not own. They did it to fund a wedding they could not afford, to impress a family they had absolutely no business associating with. They have no money, Richard. They do not have a retirement fund. They do not have a 401k. They do not even own the house they sleep in. I was paying for it, and as of yesterday afternoon, I completely cut them off." There was a heavy, pregnant pause on the line. I could hear the faint, muffled sound of classical music playing in the background of the boutique, a stark contrast to the absolute destruction happening over the phone. "I despise liars, Liam," Richard whispered, the venom in his voice making the hair on my arms stand straight up. "I despise people who pretend to be something they are not. Your brother was about to marry my daughter under the guise of an equal partnership. He was going to use her trust fund. He is nothing but a parasite. He is exactly what they raised him to be," I said honestly. "He has never worked for anything in his life." "Stay on the line, Liam," Richard commanded, his tone shifting into pure corporate executioner mode. "Do not hang up. I want you to hear every single second of this." I heard the sound of a heavy wooden door swinging open. The classical music grew louder. Then, I heard Richard's heavy, authoritative footsteps marching across the hardwood floor of the showroom. "Richard, look at this incredible fit," Julian's voice echoed through the phone, sounding incredibly smug, arrogant, and completely oblivious to the hurricane about to hit him. "The tailor says he can have the final alterations done by Thursday. What do you think? It really makes me look like a CEO, doesn't it? Take it off," Richard's voice boomed, completely shattering the polite, hushed atmosphere of the boutique. "Excuse me," Julian stammered, his arrogant tone vanishing instantly, replaced by the nervous squeak of a cornered mouse. I said, "Take the damn tuxedo off your body right now, Julian," Richard ordered, his voice echoing like a crack of thunder. I could hear the collective gasp of the boutique staff. "You are not buying that suit, because you are not marrying my daughter. Richard, please, what on earth is going on?" That was my mother's voice. It was high-pitched, laced with immediate, visceral panic. I could practically see her rushing forward in her expensive shoes, her hands fluttering nervously. "Is there a problem with the wedding budget? Because Albert and I can certainly adjust our contribution. We have plenty of liquid assets." "Your contribution?" Richard let out a bark of humorless, terrifying laughter that sent chills down my spine. "What contribution, Eleanor?" Are you going to pay me with the money you just stole from your oldest son? Or are you going to use the fraudulent credit line you tried to open yesterday by committing federal identity theft at your local bank? The silence that followed was absolute. It was the heavy, suffocating sound of a perfectly constructed, fraudulent universe collapsing completely in on itself. I do not know what you are talking about, my father stammered. His voice was trembling so violently I could hear the fear rattling in his chest over the international connection. Liam is confused. We had permission. Do not insult my intelligence, Albert, Richard snarled. I am holding an email from Liam on my phone right now. It contains the exact financial records of Apex Holdings. It contains the forged deed to the downtown real estate you illegally sold. It contains the foreclosure notice for your suburban house. You are entirely bankrupt. You are federal criminals. You have been living off the secret, unacknowledged charity of the son you just robbed blind. Liam? My mother gasped, her voice cracking into a high, hysterical pitch. Liam is Apex Holdings? No, that is impossible. He works in Dubai. He does not have that kind of salary. He would have told us. He would have shared his success with his family. He did not tell you because he knew you were leeches. Richard spat, his disgust palpable. Chloe, grab your purse and your coat. We are leaving. Right now. Daddy, what is happening? Chloe cried out, clearly terrified by her father's unbridled rage. Julian, what did you do? The wedding is entirely cancelled, Chloe. Give him the engagement ring back immediately. These people are professional grifters. They were going to use you and my hard-earned bank accounts as their personal inheritance and retirement fund. No. Chloe, wait. Please. Julian screamed, the desperation finally breaking through his carefully curated golden child facade. It is a massive misunderstanding. My brother is crazy. He is jealous of me. He has always wanted to ruin my life. Your brother, Richard said, his voice dropping to a lethal, quiet whisper, is a self-made, brilliant man who just handed me the exact weapon I needed to save my daughter from making the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of her life. If any of you ever attempt to contact Chloe again, I will personally fund Liam's lawsuit against you. I will hire a team of corporate lawyers to bury you so deep in the legal system you will never see the sunlight again. Take off the suit, Julian. It doesn't belong to you. Nothing you have belongs to you. I heard the heavy, definitive slam of the boutique's thick glass front door. Richard and Chloe had walked out. The connection was still open. For a long, agonizing minute, the only sound coming through the speaker of my phone was the sound of my mother weeping hysterically, and my father hyperventilating as his chest tightened in panic. Then, Julian must have realized the phone was still connected and resting on a table. I heard a scuffle, the sound of fabric tearing, and suddenly Julian was screaming directly into the microphone. Liam, you ruined my life. You ruined absolutely everything. I was going to be set for life. I was going to be rich. Why would you do this to your own family? You ruined your own life, Julian, I said. My voice as cold and unforgiving as a steel trap. You wanted a $100,000 wedding. Now you have $100,000 legal debt. Enjoy the Porsche. I hope you can sleep in the back seat when the bank takes the house. Do not ever call me again. I hung up the phone. I did not block their numbers yet. I wanted them to try and reach me. I wanted to see the exact shape and scope of their absolute desperation. Over the next 6 hours, my phone logged 42 missed calls. They left voice messages begging, pleading, and threatening. My mother tried to use the memory of my late grandmother's funeral to guilt me into fixing the situation. My father threatened to cut me out of the family, completely forgetting that you cannot threaten a man who holds the literal deed to your survival. They were thrashing in the deep, dark end of the ocean, and I had just taken away their only life raft. The human ego is a terrifyingly resilient thing. Even when faced with absolute, undeniable destruction and the cold, hard facts of their own crimes, a true narcissist will completely refuse to accept reality. They will double down. They will twist the narrative, manipulate the timeline, and lie through their teeth until they convince themselves that they are the ultimate victim. 3 days after the disastrous, humiliating scene at the bridal boutique, the storm shifted from a private family panic to public warfare. Julian, having lost his wealthy fiancée, his extravagant wedding, his stolen car, and his dignity, decided to take his rage to the internet. He posted a massive 20-minute, tear-filled video on all his social media accounts. He sat in his childhood bedroom, looking intentionally disheveled and heartbroken, and spun a wild, entirely fabricated story. He claimed that his wealthy, abusive, sociopathic older brother had systematically sabotaged his life out of pure, unadulterated jealousy. He claimed I had stolen his college fund years ago, locked away family assets, and used my money to intimidate his fiancée's family into canceling the wedding. He wept into the camera, begging his followers for sympathy, and shamelessly started a GoFundMe campaign to help a heartbroken, betrayed groom rebuild his shattered life. For a few short hours, the internet rallied behind him. The comments were full of gullible people calling me a monster, telling Julian to stay strong, and donating small amounts of cash to his fraudulent fund. I watched the video from my desk in Dubai, sipping my morning coffee. I did not feel angry. I did not feel the urge to scream. I just felt a profound sense of pity for how incredibly stupid my brother actually was. He was waving a bright red flag in front of a massive bull, entirely unaware of the razor-sharp horns headed straight for his chest. I called Marcus. "Did you see Julian's little Hollywood performance?" "I saw it," Marcus chuckled darkly, the sound of a lawyer who already knows he has won the case. "He just publicly accused you of massive financial crimes. That is documented, broadcasted defamation. But honestly, Liam, you do not even need to respond or file a cease and desist. The internet always finds the truth, especially when angry people are involved." Marcus was absolutely right. Less than 12 hours later, someone from Chloe's social circle, likely one of the bridesmaids who had been left with a useless, expensive dress, leaked the absolute truth. An anonymous account posted a screenshot of the canceled wedding venue contract, citing fraudulent funds and bounced checks. Then, someone leaked the horrifying story of my father getting thrown out of the bank by security for identity theft. The narrative flipped instantly. The internet turned on Julian like a pack of starving wolves. His comment section became a brutal, relentless mockery of a spoiled, entitled child who got caught stealing from his own hard-working brother. Internet sleuths dug up his old posts bragging about designer clothes while having no listed occupation. They reported his GoFundMe for fraud, and the platform shut it down, freezing the few $100s he had managed to con out of people. He was forced to delete the video and deactivate all his social media accounts by midnight, retreating into digital hiding. But my parents were not done fighting. Desperation makes weak people incredibly dangerous, and my parents were backed into a tight corner with absolutely zero options left. The bank had officially served them with aggressive foreclosure papers. Their credit cards were useless pieces of plastic. The angry cash buyer of my apartment was filing a massive lawsuit against them for a huge breach of contract. They needed a miracle or they needed a scapegoat to take the fall. They chose me. It was a Thursday evening, just as the sun was setting over the desert, when I received a phone call from a blocked international number. I usually ignore blocked calls, but a strange, nagging instinct told me to answer this one. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice guarded. "Am I speaking with Liam?" The voice on the other end was gruff, highly professional, and entirely American. "Speaking. Who is this?" "This is Detective Vance with the Financial Crimes Unit back in your home city," the man said, his tone carrying the weight of a badge. "I am calling regarding a formal, very serious criminal complaint filed against you by your parents, Albert and Eleanor." I sat up straight in my chair, my pulse quickening slightly. "A criminal complaint? What kind of complaint?" "Detective. They walked into the precinct yesterday afternoon and filed a massive report," Detective Vance explained, his tone carefully neutral but carrying a distinct hint of underlying suspicion. They are claiming severe financial abuse of the elderly. They state that you coerced them into signing over property deeds, that you have been illegally hoarding their retirement funds and inheritance in offshore accounts, and that you initiated a malicious banking freeze to intentionally bankrupt them and force them out of their family home. They are asking for an immediate arrest warrant. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound echoed loudly in my empty apartment. It was so incredibly audacious, so breathtakingly delusional, that it crossed the line from tragedy into pure, unadulterated comedy. They honestly thought they could use the local police department to force me to unlock my accounts and hand them my hard-earned salary. "Is something funny to you, son?" Detective Vance asked, his voice hardening immediately. "Financial abuse of the elderly is a serious federal felony. If these allegations are proven true, the district attorney will push for immediate extradition from Dubai." "Detective Vance, I am not laughing at the law. I am laughing at the absolute desperation of two federal criminals trying to outrun a speeding train," I said, my voice dropping its humor and becoming sharp, clinical, and authoritative. "Are you sitting at your desk computer right now?" "Yes, I am." "Give me your official department email address," I demanded. "I am going to send you a secure file right now. I want you to open it while I am on the phone with you." Vance hesitated, then rattled off his email address. I opened my secure cloud drive, pulled the exact same devastating PDF package I had sent to my family and Richard, and forwarded it directly to the police department. "Sent," I said. "Open it." I listened to the clicking of his computer mouse. For 2 solid minutes, the only sound on the line was Detective Vance breathing heavily as he read through the meticulous documents. "I am looking at a corporate ledger from a company called Apex Holdings," Vance murmured, sounding genuinely confused. "It shows 4 years of automated mortgage payments to a suburban address. Your parents' address. Keep scrolling, detective. Look at the articles of incorporation. I am the sole 100% owner of Apex Holdings. I have been secretly keeping my parents off the street for 4 years while living in a tiny studio apartment in Dubai, working myself to the bone." More clicking. A sharp intake of breath. "Now look at the next legal document," I instructed coldly. "That is the deed to the downtown real estate they claimed I coerced them out of. Look at the ownership name. It belongs to Apex Holdings, not me personally. Now look at the transfer documents they signed last week to sell it to a cash buyer. Look at the signature. They signed your personal name," Vance realized, the pieces rapidly snapping together in his trained investigative mind. "They forged an individual's signature to illegally sell a corporate asset. That is wire fraud." "Exactly," I said. "But the real nail in the coffin is the final document. The incident report from First National Bank, officially filed by a senior loan officer named Elena. My father walked into that branch and attempted to open a $60,000 line of credit using my social security number. He committed identity theft on high-definition security cameras, detective. The footage has already been secured by my lawyer, Marcus." The silence on the line was profound. When Detective Vance finally spoke again, his tone had completely shifted. He went from a suspicious interrogator hunting an abusive son to a man who had just uncovered a massive, multi-count felony fraud ring operating inside a quiet suburban family. "Liam," Detective Vance said quietly, almost in disbelief. "Did they know? Did they know you were the one paying their mortgage when they sold your apartment out from under you?" "No," I replied, staring out at the dark desert night. "They thought they were stealing from a son who didn't care, while being financially subsidized by a guardian angel they didn't respect. They cut their own throat. I am going to need you to put me in touch with your lawyer, Marcus, immediately," Vance said, the heavy gears of justice rapidly turning in his voice. "This is no longer a financial abuse investigation against you. This is a grand theft, wire fraud, and identity theft investigation against Albert and Eleanor. Do you intend to press charges?" "I want them prosecuted to the absolute maximum extent of the law," I said without a single ounce of hesitation. "I want absolutely no plea deals. I want them to stand in front of a judge and answer for exactly what they did. Understood, Detective Vance said. We will be issuing arrest warrants within the next 48 hours. 2 days later, Marcus sent me a text message. It was a brief, objective legal update, but it carried the massive weight of a monumental victory. The police just executed the warrants. Your parents were handcuffed in their driveway in full view of the entire neighborhood. Julian tried to physically intervene and was cited for obstruction of justice. They are currently sitting in holding cells waiting for arraignment. The trap is completely sprung. It is over, Liam. I read the text message 3 times. I did not feel a rush of euphoric joy. I did not throw a party or pop champagne. I just felt a deep, profound sense of relief. The heavy, suffocating chain that had tied me to their toxic, parasitic lives had finally, permanently been severed. They had built an elaborate trap to steal my future, and they had locked themselves inside it. The wheels of the American justice system turn incredibly slowly, but when they finally arrive at their destination, they grind absolutely everything in their path to fine dust. 3 long months passed. I requested a 2-week leave of absence from my engineering firm in Dubai, booked a first-class ticket, and flew back to the States. I did not fly back to visit family, to reminisce, or to sleep in my old childhood bedroom. I flew back to watch the final, devastating curtain fall on the people who had actively tried to destroy my life. I walked into the massive, marble-floored courthouse downtown wearing a sharply tailored charcoal suit, walking shoulder to shoulder with Marcus. The courtroom was freezing cold, smelling of old wood, floor polish, and nervous sweat. I sat in the very back row, keeping my posture rigid and entirely unbothered, while Marcus took his place near the prosecutor's table as an advising witness. When the heavy wooden doors swung open, the armed bailiff led my parents into the room. I almost did not recognize them. The arrogant, self-righteous, perfectly styled people who had mocked me on that video call were completely gone. My father looked like he had aged 20 hard years in a matter of months. His posture was severely slumped. His hair had gone completely gray and unkempt, and the cheap, oversized suit he was wearing hung loosely on his rapidly shrinking frame. My mother looked entirely broken. The designer clothes, the expensive jewelry, and the flawless makeup were gone. They were replaced by deep, dark circles under her eyes, a pale complexion, and a constant, nervous tremble in her hands. Julian sat a few rows ahead of me in the gallery. He looked utterly pathetic. Without my secret money funding his luxurious lifestyle, brutal reality had hit him like a runaway freight train. He was wearing a wrinkled button-down shirt, staring blankly at the floor. He had been forced to take a minimum-wage job at a local hardware store just to pay his rent in a tiny, run-down apartment on the bad side of town. The Porsche had been aggressively repossessed weeks ago. His golden child status meant absolutely nothing in the real world where bills had to be paid. The judge presiding over the case was Judge Martinez, a formidable woman in her late 50s known for having absolutely zero tolerance for white-collar crime and family fraud. She meticulously reviewed the massive stack of evidence, the forged real estate deed, the high-definition bank security footage of the identity theft, the financial ledger from Apex Holdings proving my financial support. My parents' overworked public defender tried to spin a tragic, desperate narrative. He claimed they were confused, aging parents operating under the misguided assumption that family assets were legally shared. He pleaded for leniency, citing their age, their previously clean records, and the emotional stress of planning a wedding. When it was my father's turn to speak before sentencing, he stood up, his knees visibly trembling, and looked directly up at the judge. He didn't even have the courage to look back at me in the gallery. "Your Honor," he croaked, his voice weak and pathetic. "We made a terrible, terrible mistake, but we are a family. We were just trying to help our youngest son start his life on the right foot. Liam has so much. He has a massive salary, a great career in Dubai, multiple properties. We thought he would understand. We thought he would forgive us. You can't send us to prison for trying to provide a nice day for our family." Judge Martinez peered over her reading glasses, her eyes as cold as absolute zero. "Mr. Albert," she said, her voice cutting through the silent courtroom like a surgical scalpel. "You do not get to stand in my courtroom and use the word family as a shield to deflect from multiple federal crimes. Family does not forge signatures on legal documents. Family does not attempt to steal a child's identity to open fraudulent credit lines. And family certainly does not secretly bleed a child dry for 4 years while constantly complaining about their lack of generosity. Your son, Liam, saved you from total bankruptcy. He sacrificed his own comfort and his own youth to keep a roof over your head. And your response to his silent charity was to steal his most valuable asset to throw a lavish party you had no business throwing." My mother began to sob quietly, burying her face in her trembling hands, her shoulders shaking violently. "You are not victims of circumstance," Judge Martinez continued mercilessly, her voice echoing off the marble walls. "You are victims of your own unchecked greed, entitlement, and arrogance. You viewed your eldest son as a personal bank account, and when the ATM finally stopped working, you tried to smash it open with a hammer. You are a disgrace to the concept of parenthood." The heavy wooden gavel came down with a sharp, terrifying crack that made Julian flinch. The sentencing was brutal but entirely justified. Because it was their first major offense, and the prisons were overcrowded, they avoided hard penitentiary time, but the consequences were still permanently life-altering. They were both sentenced to 5 years of strict federal probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and they were ordered to pay massive financial restitution to the cash buyer they had defrauded, as well as the wedding vendors they had bounced checks on. Furthermore, because of the frozen accounts and the end of my Apex Holdings payments, the bank had successfully completed the foreclosure. The suburban house I had spent 4 years saving was legally gone. They were officially homeless, penniless, and carrying felony fraud convictions that would prevent them from ever securing a decent loan, renting a nice apartment, or getting a reputable job again. As the courtroom cleared and the bailiffs led my parents away to process their probation paperwork, Julian finally turned around and saw me sitting in the back row. He stood up and rushed toward me, his face pale, tears streaming down his cheeks, snot running from his nose. "Liam, please," he begged, grabbing the sleeve of my suit jacket with desperate hands. "Please, I have absolutely nothing. Chloe won't even speak to me. I'm working the cash register at a hardware store and I can barely afford groceries. Mom and Dad are going to have to live in a cheap motel. You won. You proved your point. You destroyed us. Please help us. We are your blood." I looked down at his hand gripping my expensive suit. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, no triumph, no guilt. Just a cold, empty void where my brother used to be. "Let go of my suit, Julian," I said softly, my voice devoid of any emotion. "You wanted the inheritance early. You wanted the luxury lifestyle without putting in the work. You got it. Now deal with the taxes." I pulled my arm away forcefully, turned my back on him, and walked out of the courtroom, leaving him crying alone in the aisles. Later that evening, while we were having dinner, Marcus told me the final, incredibly pathetic piece of the puzzle. When my parents were desperately trying to scrape together money for their legal defense weeks ago, they had reached out to Aunt Beatrice, the very woman whose toxic advice had convinced them to sell my apartment in the first place. Instead of helping them, Beatrice had panicked about her own involvement in the forgery. Fearing she would be dragged into the lawsuit or arrested as an accessory, she had secretly emptied a small joint savings account she shared with my mother, packed her bags in the middle of the night, and moved out of state, completely abandoning them to the wolves. There is absolutely no honor among thieves. They had betrayed me, and ultimately, they had betrayed each other. The next morning, the sky over the city was a brilliant, crystal-clear blue. The air felt crisp, fresh, and entirely devoid of the toxic, suffocating heaviness that had choked my life for the past decade. Before heading to the international airport to fly back to Dubai, there was one last, incredibly important thing I needed to do. Marcus and I drove downtown and parked on the street in front of my old apartment building. Because the fraudulent sale had been legally voided by the federal judge, the title had completely and officially reverted back to Apex Holdings. The apartment, my sanctuary, was mine again. We walked into the grand, brightly lit lobby. Javier, the older building manager who had known me since I first moved in 5 years ago, spotted me immediately. A massive, genuine smile broke across his weathered face. "Mr. Liam, welcome back, sir," Javier said, rushing over and reaching out to shake my hand vigorously. "I heard about all the trouble with the title transfer. The police were here, lawyers were here. It was a massive headache for the real estate board. I am so incredibly glad to see you are still the rightful owner of the penthouse." "Thank you, Javier," I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth in my chest for the first time in months. "It is really good to see you. It is good to be back. But I won't be staying long." We took the private elevator up to the penthouse floor. I unlocked the heavy oak door and stepped inside my sanctuary. The exposed brick walls, the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling city skyline, the quiet serenity of the space. It was exactly as I had left it. Everything was in its right place. The books on the shelves, the expensive leather couch, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. But as I stood in the center of the living room, looking out at the city I used to love, I realized something profound and life-changing. I did not need this apartment anymore. I had bought this place years ago to prove to myself that I could survive without my family. It was a fortress built out of an underlying fear of abandonment. It was a place to hide. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had faced the absolute worst betrayal imaginable from the people who were supposed to love me most, and I had not only survived, I had dismantled the people who tried to break me. "It's a beautiful place, Liam," Marcus said, leaning against the marble kitchen counter, looking around admiringly. "Are you going to rent it out while you finish your engineering contract in Dubai? You could get a massive monthly income from this." I shook my head slowly, feeling a profound sense of clarity. "No, Marcus, I am going to sell it. For real this time." Marcus raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Are you sure? It is a prime piece of real estate. The market value is only going up. You fought so hard to get it back." "I am entirely sure," I said, feeling a massive, invisible weight lift off my shoulders. This apartment represents the old Liam. The Liam who was constantly trying to buy safety. The Liam who secretly funded people who hated him just to feel useful and loved. I don't need that version of myself anymore. I want you to put it on the market by Monday. Liquidate the asset. I am going to take the massive capital from the sale, head back to Dubai, and officially launch my own independent engineering consulting firm. I am done building empires for other people. I am going to build my own. Marcus smiled, a genuine, incredibly proud grin. "I will draft the listing paperwork by tomorrow morning. You are going to make an absolute killing on this sale, Liam." "That's the plan," I said. We walked out of the apartment, and I locked the heavy oak door for the final time. I did not look back. I did not feel a single ounce of nostalgia or regret. I was leaving a graveyard behind, and I was walking toward a brilliant future that belonged entirely to me. When I sat in the luxurious first-class lounge at the airport a few hours later, waiting for my flight back to the Middle East, I pulled out my cell phone. I opened my contacts list. I scrolled down to my father's name. I looked at it for a second, then hit delete. I scrolled to my mother's name. Delete. Julian. Delete. Aunt Beatrice. Uncle Henry. Every single toxic, parasitic relative who had ever demanded my time, my money, my salary, or my energy. Delete. 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 I blocked their phone numbers, wiped them from my social media, and completely, permanently erased them from my digital existence. It was the absolute equivalent of a funeral. A peaceful funeral for the loving family I always wished I had, and a stark acceptance of the reality I actually lived in. I was officially an orphan by choice, and I had never felt more incredibly, undeniably free. Sometimes, the people who share your DNA are the ones holding the sharpest knife to your back. Society conditions us to believe that family is absolutely everything, that blood is thicker than water, and that you must forgive unconditionally, no matter how many times you are abused. But that is a toxic lie designed to keep victims trapped in endless cycles of financial and emotional abuse. You do not owe your success, your peace, your college fund, or your sanity to people who only view you as a resource to be exploited. Establishing an ironclad boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of ultimate self-preservation. I had to let my family completely destroy themselves so that I could finally learn how to live. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to cut off the people you were supposed to trust the most just to protect your own peace and your own future? Share your story in the comments below. We are a community here, and your voice matters more than you know. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Stay strong, and never, ever apologize for protecting yourself.